I am Ine Bella. serve as the supervisor for Accuracy's Library Science team. And joining me today is Alison Olsen, one of our digital archivists. This presentation provides an overview and highlights key 2023 NIH Data Management and Sharing Plan updates and the Genomic Data Management and Sharing policy as well. The objectives for this session includes is designed to equip PIs and investigators and study teams with available information, resources, and services. The objectives include an overview of the DMSP policy, policy requirements, key updates and developments, progress and initiatives done by ACUS, which includes their policy support, consultations, and our newly launched public access repository, CHOP Dataverse. We'll also have a little wrap up at the end, and then time permitting, hopefully for some questions and answers. The 2023 NIH Data Management and Sharing Policy, which went into effect January 25th, 2023, emphasizes the importance of sharing scientific data to promote transparency, reproducibility, and collaboration in research funded by NIH. This policy replaces the 2003 NIH Data Sharing Policy and introduces more detailed requirements for managing and sharing data throughout the research lifecycle. The policy applies to all NIH-funded research generating scientific data, including grants, contracts, and intramural research, regardless of funding level. The Data Management and Sharing Plan describes the following: 1, data type; 2, related tools, software, and/or code; 3, data standards; 4, data preservation, access, and associated timelines; 5, access, distribution, and reuse considerations; and 6, oversight of data management and sharing. The new policy also requires a submission of a two-page maximum. Policy requirements include submission of a data management and sharing plan outlining the study team's strategies for managing and sharing data produced by the research effort. 2, the policy applies to all NIH-funded research that generates scientific data, emphasizing transparency, accessibility, and the responsible sharing of data to advance science. 3, compliance with the approved data management and sharing plan, which may differ from the submitted plan if modifications have been made during the application process. 4, data sharing should occur as early as possible, but not later than the time of publication or the end of the project funding period, ensuring timely access to research findings. 5, NIH allows researchers to include the cost of data management and sharing, such as repository fees, curation, or storage, in their funding application budgets. 6, the DMSP plan is reviewed by NIH program staff as part of the application process, and compliance is monitored throughout the project via progress reports and final deliverables. What is data management and sharing plan? What is a data management and sharing plan? A data management and sharing plan, or DMSP, is a document that outlines how scientific data will be handled during and after a research project. It describes how data will be managed, preserved, and shared to promote transparency, reproducibility, and collaboration. The DMSP is a formal plan required by the NIH for all funding applications that generate scientific data. Its purpose is to ensure that researchers manage their data responsibly and make it available for future use in accordance with the ethical and legal standards. The key characteristics of the DMSP include the DMSP specifies the type of data that will be collected, standards and methods for organizing and documenting the data, and the tools or software needed to access and analyze it. 2, it also details how and where the data will be stored, when it will be shared, and any conditions that may restrict access or reuse, such as privacy concerns or proprietary issues. 3, the plan provides a roadmap for long-term data preservation, ensuring that the data remains accessible and reusable even after the conclusion of the research project. Why is it important? A well-crafted DMSP helps researchers plan ahead, allocate resources effectively, and address potential challenges related to data management and sharing early in the research process. Two, it also ensures that data can be accessed and used by the broader scientific community, contributing to the reproducibility of findings and advancing knowledge in the field. Elements of the Data Management Sharing Plan 2023. One, data type. Researchers must specify the types of scientific data that will be generated and shared. This includes data sets necessary to validate research findings and excludes preliminary analysis, laboratory notebooks, and similar materials. Two, related tools, software, and code. The plan should describe any tools, software, or code needed to access, interpret, or analyze the shared data. These resources must either be shared or must be shared or their availability clearly documented. Standards. Investigators must outline the data standards they will use, such as metadata schemas or file formats, ensuring that the data is fair, which is findable, accessible, interpretable, and reusable. Four, data preservation, access, and timelines. The plan must indicate where the data will be stored, such as an NIH recommended repository, and specify when the data will be made available. Sharing should occur no later than the time of publication or the conclusion of the funding period. Five, access, distribution, or reuse considerations. Researchers must address potential restrictions on sharing data, such as privacy concerns, informed consent limitations, proprietary issues, or other legal or ethical consideration. And the last is six, which is oversight of data management and sharing. The plan must specify who oversees the implementation of data management and sharing activities to ensure compliance throughout the project. What are the five major questions a DMSP should answer? One, what data will be collected, managed, and shared? The DMSP should clearly identify the type of data generated during this research, including raw and processed data sets, metadata, and any other materials required to validate findings. It is important to specify which data will be shared and which will not be, and which will not, with justifications for exclusions, such as sensitive or proprietary data. Two, how will the data be documented and organized? The plan must describe how the data will be organized, including use of standardized file formats, naming conventions, and metadata to ensure that the data is fair. This includes specifying the documentation practices and metadata standards that will be used to make data understandable to others. Where will the data be stored and preserved? The DMSP should identify the repositories where the data will be deposited for long-term preservation and access, such as NIH-supported or discipline-specific repositories. It should also explain how the data will be preserved over time to maintain its usability, including plans for backup and version control. When and how will the data be shared? The plan must outline the timeline for data sharing, which typically should occur no later than the time of publication or at the end of the award period. It should also specify how the data will be shared, including access procedures and any conditions for reuse. Five, who will oversee the data management and sharing? The DMSP should assign responsibility for implementing and monitoring the plan, typically to the principal investigator or a designated data manager. It's important to describe how compliance with the plan will be ensured throughout the project. By answering these five key questions, the DMSP ensures that data management and sharing are thoroughly planned, transparent, and in alignment with the NIH expectations and best practices. Key updates. Some of the key updates that have come through are one, data management and sharing plan requirement. All NIH-funded researchers must submit a DMSP plan at the time of proposal submission, detailing how they will manage and share scientific data. The DMSP plan is now a format is a formal part of the funding proposal and subject to peer review. Two, expectation of data sharing. Researchers are expected to share scientific data as soon as possible, no later than the publication time or the award period's end. Data sharing aligns with ensuring that data sharing aligns with the FAIR principles. Applicability, the policy applies to all NIH-funded research, generating scientific data, including grants, contracts, cooperative agreements, and intramural research. This applies regardless of the funding amount of research or research discipline. Budget justification. Researchers can request funding to cover costs associated with data management and sharing, for example, storage, curation, or repository fees. Budget justifications for these costs must be included in the proposal. Compliance monitoring. Compliance with the DMSP plan will be monitored throughout the project lifecycle. Failure to comply may impact future funding decisions. Flexibility in repository choice. While NIH encourages the use of established repositories such as GenBank, dbGaP, researchers can use any repository that aligns with the policy's expectations. Ethical and legal considerations. Researchers must address potential privacy, confidentiality, and intellectual property concerns in their DMSP plan. Sensitive data, such as human subject data, must be shared following applicable laws, regulations, and consent agreements. So we'll move into more key updates. The National Institutes of Health, NIH, has announced significant updates to its public access policy set to take effect on December 31st, 2025. Key changes include immediate public access. The new policy eliminates the previous 12-month embargo period, ensuring that all NIH-funded research articles are accessible on PubMed Central immediately upon publication. Scope of applicability. This policy applies to author-accepted manuscripts accepted on or after December 31st, 2025, regardless of when the award that funded the research was made. And on to the genomic data sharing policy update. The NIH genomic data sharing policy has been updated to ensure responsible and transparent sharing of genomic data generated from NIH-funded research, effective January 25, 2025. The updated policy aims to enhance data accessibility while safeguarding participant privacy and promoting ethical data use. Here's an overview of the key compliance requirements. One, scope of the policy applies to all NIH-funded research that generates large-scale genomic data, for example, genome-wide association studies, sequencing, and transcriptomics. Includes secondary research using existing genomic data sets. Key compliance requirements include data sharing plans. Investigators must include a detailed genomic data sharing plan in grant applications or proposal, describing how data will be shared and accessed. The plan must address timelines, repository selection, and any limitations on data sharing. Two, informed consent. Researchers must obtain informed consent from participants for genomic data use and sharing, including potential broad future use. Consent must align with the intended level of data sharing, for example, controlled versus unrestricted access. Data submission. Genomic data must be submitted to an NIH designated repository, for example, dbGaP, Genomic Data or Genomic Data Commons. For long-term storage access, data should be de-identified and comply with standards for interoperability. Data access. NIH encourages broad data sharing to maximize scientific value while balancing ethical and privacy concerns. Controlled access mechanisms may be used for sensitive data sets with data access requests subject to review by NIH data access committees. Privacy and security. Researchers must protect participant confidentiality and comply with relevant laws, including the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, and NIH security guidelines. Timeline for sharing. Data must generally be shared no later than the date of publication or within the specified time frame after data generation, for example, 6 months. Accountability. Investigators and institutions are responsible for adhering to the GDS policy and monitoring compliance throughout the research cycle. Okay, and here is some more information on the NIH Genomic Guidance. One is the NIH Genomic Data Sharing Policy website. With this website provides comprehensive information, including policy details and updates, FAQs about compliance, examples of genomic data sharing plans, and then submission and access procedures for genomic data. All the links have been included in the slides, which we'll also send out to everyone in attendance. And then two is the NIH Office of Science Policy. This website offers resources on data sharing, privacy, and ethical considerations related to genomic research. The third one is the NIH Data Sharing Repository. NIH designated repositories like dbGaP, database of genotypes and phenotypes, provide technical assistance and submission guidelines. And then the last one is the fourth is the NIH Strides Initiative. This supports the use of cloud platforms, for example, AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure, for data sharing, offering technical support for compliance with NIH data management and security requirements. Now, to assist researchers with developing compliant and effective data management and sharing plans, ACUS offers tailored consultations designed to address specific needs and challenges. Our DMSP consultation services aim to ensure that all research teams understand the 2023 NIH management and sharing policy requirements and are equipped to meet them. ACUS has had about 65 consultations to date with PIs, investigators, and research study teams. The services offered in our consultations. One, we provide one-on-one consultations to help researchers identify the key elements of their data management and sharing needs, including data types, standards, and preservation strategies. Two, during consultations, we assist with selecting appropriate repositories for data storage and sharing, ensuring alignment with NIH recommendations and FAIR principles. Three, we offer support in drafting and reviewing DMSPs to ensure they are comprehensive and compliant with NIH expectations. So what are some of the benefits of using consultation services? One, by leveraging our expertise, researchers can streamline the process of creating a DMSP, saving time and reducing the risk of non-compliance with NIH requirements. Consultations help ensure that plans are not only compliant, but also practical, supporting the long-term usability and accessibility of research data. Our support can enhance the quality of data management practices, ultimately contributing to the reproducibility and impact of the research. Our goal is to support researchers with the knowledge and tools they need to create robust, compliant DMSPs that align with the NIH vision for openness and transparency. Getting started writing your DMSP. The DMP tool is a free, user-friendly online platform that helps researchers create, review, and share data management plans that comply with funding agency requirements, including the 2023 NIH Data Management and Sharing Policy. It is developed by California Digital Library and other institutional partners. The DMP tool is widely used and used across academic and research institutes to simplify the process of drafting high-quality data management and sharing plans. Now, some of the functions of the DMP tool include it provides agency-specific templates, including one tailored for the NIH DMSP, ensuring researchers address all required elements of the policy. Two, it offers step-by-step guidance, sample text, and best practices to assist researchers in writing clear and compliant plans. 3, researchers can collaborate with team members directly in the tool, streamlining the review and editing process for data management plans. Benefits of using the DMP tool include that it ensures that researchers meet specific funding agency requirements, reducing the risk of revisions or non-compliance. 2, by using preloaded templates and guidance, researchers have time and effort in creating robust data management and sharing plans. 3, it promotes a better planning and coordination for data management activities, supporting efficient workflows throughout the research lifecycle. How to access the DMP tool. The DMP tool is accessible at dmptool.org. Researchers can log in using their institutional credentials to create a free account. Once logged in, users can browse funding agency templates, access tailored resources, and begin drafting their plans immediately. ACUS also provides feedback on drafts created in the DMP tool to ensure compliance with the NIH policy and other funding agency requirements. The DMP tool is an essential resource for researchers looking to create effective and compliant data management and sharing plans, streamlining the process and ensuring alignment with funder expectations. Here we have some other resources that are available on the CHOP Research Institute and also on our ACUS website for ACUS resources. All of these will be available for you to access after this session because they will all be included in the plan, in the presentation in our PowerPoint. Now I'm going to transfer things over to Allison Olsen so she can begin to discuss our CHOP Dataverse, our public access repository. Allison?
Great, thank you, Ine. And hello, everyone. For years, the ARCIS Library Science team has offered services to assist researchers in complying with the NIH data management and sharing policies. These include the DMSP consultations, which Ine just mentioned, offering DMSP templates and text to use in creating your grant application, which you can find at the links that were the slide just before this one, and also our core service of research data archiving and sharing within ARCIS in a secure, preservation standards and fair compliant way, which is available to all CHOP faculty and staff. After the release of the 2023 NIH data sharing requirements, we started to receive feedback both from CHOP PIs and comments on CHOP NIH grant applications that archiving and sharing data within ARCIS was not wide enough for public access. We realized we needed another service to support CHOP researchers in complying with the NIH standards, a public access repository. For the rest of this talk, I'm going to go over ARCIS's new public access repository and set up for sharing CHOP data. Last year, the Library Sciences team began exploring options for establishing a public access repository at CHOP. And I think I'm on the slide before this one.
This slide? Okay.
Yeah. We conducted an environmental scan to understand how similar institutions manage and share biomedical research data. Based on this research, we defined the scope and requirements for data sharing at CHOP. Following this early phase, we launched a preliminary version of the public access repository and issued a call for pilot studies from across the CHOP Institute. Studies selected were ready to share their research data publicly and had appropriate consents for de-identified data sharing. Collaborating closely with these research teams, we refined the repository's design, including metadata descriptions and technical specifications, to better meet the needs of researchers and ensure compliance with data sharing standards. We are pleased to announce that the public access repository is now fully operational and ready to receive additional studies for publication. Our requirements for selecting an option for public sharing, of course, started with the NIH policies, as the main purpose of this is to make sure we're compliant with the data sharing requirements. So aside from the main data sharing policy, some other guidelines we took into consideration were the NIH desirable characteristics for data repositories, which outline best practices for repositories to ensure accessibility, usability, and long-term preservation of shared research data. Key features in these requirements are robust metadata standards, interoperability with other systems, secure and ethical data handling, and a commitment to sustainable data access over time. We also explored the NIH Generalist Repository Ecosystem Initiative, or GREY. That's a collaboration between 7 existing generalist data repositories to establish common standards and applications for sharing data from NIH-funded studies. There are links in the slide if you want to explore more. We also reviewed the FAIR data standards, which we've mentioned a couple times. They're internationally applied, so you'll see these in Europe, in the US and Canada. They'll say FAIR data and FAIR data requirements. And they ensure research data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. They emphasize using standardized metadata, persistent identifiers, and open formats to make data easy to locate, share, integrate with other data sets, and reuse for future research. We had some additional needs for CHOP data, like that the data would be directly downloadable by users, and that there would be secure data storage with an easy to predict cost model. Also, we needed to have administrative control over the shared data sets, meaning that we can set the description standards, that we can have a CHOP branded landing page, and that CHOP and the researcher retain control and rights over any of the data shared on the platform. The application we chose also needed to have features including reliable and well-resourced technical support and development, with planned updates and feature integrations going into the future, a clean and easy to use and search user interface, and the ability to customize your metadata and search terms and draft user agreements. We also set a clear scope for the type of data that can be shared in the public access repository. As we do not have the staff time to regularly review outside of CHOP data requests, we decided we would only share de-identified data sets with proper consents for public sharing. All data sets in the repository are fully open access and directly downloadable by the public. The NIH has separate and specific standards for sharing genomics data, with more limited data storage and sharing requirements. Because of this, the public repository is not intended for genomics data. We recommend, as does the NIH, using an NIH-managed repository. You can reach out to the library science team if you want to discuss this more. Okay, so after reviewing our scope and the software options and our requirements, we decided on a CHOP organization within Harvard Dataverse as the best option. Harvard Dataverse is an open access repository for sharing, preserving, and accessing research data across disciplines. Managed as a collaboration between Harvard Library, Harvard University IT, and the Institute of Qualitative and Social Science, it is part of the NIH's GREY initiative, which I mentioned before, and identified by the NIH and leading publishers like the Public Library of Science, Nature, and Elsevier as a recommended repository for sharing research data. Harvard Dataverse also already has biomedical collections, including from peer institutions like Harvard Medical Schools and Johns Hopkins Medicine. Harvard Dataverse has many great features that we're excited about in sharing our data there, like comprehensive tools for searching both data and metadata, user-friendly and easy to navigate, with all content indexed for web searches, ensuring maximum discoverability. CHOP has its own branded identity and dedicated landing page. Also, before downloading data, users are required to view and provide their name and institution to a data use agreement or requirements to ensure they're accessing it responsibly. The repository provides low-cost, predictable storage options, which I'll go over later in this talk, making it an affordable solution for long-term data sharing. CHOP retains full ownership, as does the research contributor of the data of deposited data. And digital object identifiers, or DOIs, which are often required to share data for publications, are created for all deposited data sets, enabling proper citation and long-term accessibility. The CHOP Dataverse is a dedicated organizational unit within the larger Dataverse platform, designed specifically for CHOP researchers to share data. Well, the data contributed to the CHOP Dataverse is integrated into the broader Dataverse collection and searchable alongside datasets from other institutions. It is also grouped together under the CHOP Dataverse identity. This ensures that all CHOP-related datasets are easily discoverable as a cohesive collection, highlighting the research contributions of CHOP, while benefiting from the visibility and interoperability of the larger Dataverse data network. Great, so I'm going to take control of the screen now, so I can give a quick demo of the page. All right. So what you see here is the CHOP landing page for all CHOP research studies within, Harvard Dataverse. So you could go back and search or find out more information from the bar up here. So we have a pilot study published on here that I can show you. So we're going to click into there. So this is one of the studies that responded to our call for pilot applications. We have some more in the works, which will be published soon. And so the library science team collaborated with this study team at CHOP to kind of figure out what data should be made publicly accessible, and all the description that you'll see here as we go through. So at the top of every dataset page, you have the citation information with like some downloadable citations. So it's really clear on, who created that data and where it came from. And then you have some of the metadata here. So this was a collaboration between the research team and the metadata librarian to come up with a standardized description. And so these kind of terms you see and the type of information you're seeing, and there's a little more metadata if you go to this metadata tab, is what we intend to do for every collection that's published on here. So, connecting the ORC IDs for the research team, having some mesh terms, and then having, some of the numbers of the size of the cohort, data types. And then we'll go to one of these other tabs. These all give you kind of information about the data set. You have the terms here. So these are general terms, basically that you'll provide information before downloading, and it clearly is showing the citation information so that you will cite this data set if you use it in further research, and also agreeing, of course, that you won't try and re-identify any of the individuals included in the data. And so I'm going to go to the Files tab. And there's two views. There's one view that just kind of lists all the files. And that one's useful if somebody wanted to download just one file. They would click on it and go to download here. But the other option, you can see this tree view. And so this is some like organization of the data that the library science team did to try and make it more understandable for reuse. So this is a machine learning project, and it's an R project. So all the data tables are R data sets. But then we have a subseries for scripts. So these are the markdown information that you would use to run the model. And then we also made sure to get configuration and reference information, so like a data dictionary for all these data sets, a README, which is describing, how to run everything and how to use all these different files in order to rerun the model, and then some configurations for using it within R. And so ideally, a researcher would download the whole thing together. So if you go to Access Dataset and you go to Download Zip, so that would zip all those files together. And you can see before you're able to download it, it comes up with those terms that I quickly showed with the citation, and then asks you to provide information about yourself, your name, email, institution. And we can share that with the data contributors if they're interested in who has downloaded their research data, along with like some general like viewing numbers and stuff like that if you contribute data and share it on the public access platform. So usually you would, put that information in, hit accept, and then you'd get the zip file, but I'm not going to do that right now. So I'm going to go back to the slides. Okay. So if you're interested and you want to share your data on the CHOP Dataverse, it will first need to be submitted to ARCUS as a data contribution. At the end of these slides, you'll find some links with more information about this process for you to explore more. As part of the submission, ARCUS will ensure the research data is stored securely and in compliance with preservation standards at CHOP. Once contributed, our metadata librarian will create standardized terms to describe the collection and make it searchable. This metadata will be added to CHOP's internal discovery platforms, including ARCUS Cohort Discovery and the Gene Data Catalog, making the data both findable and requestable for reuse within the CHOP enterprise. Finally, the library science team will publish the metadata and research data on CHOP Dataverse, enabling public access to the dataset. The amount of data and level of metadata shared, along with configuration and reference information that might be needed to understand and reuse the data, to be shared on Dataverse can be more limited than what is preserved internally and shared internally within ARCUS and CHOP. The contributor has the discretion to determine what is appropriate for public sharing, balancing visibility with any necessary restrictions. The cost, how much will this cost you to publicly share? All ARCUS support, archiving, data storage within CHOP, metadata creation, data transfer, and general use of CHOP Dataverse and its tools is free. But as the CHOP Dataverse is managed outside the CHOP enterprise and files are accessible to the public, we need to use a separate web server for the files. Contributors are responsible for storage costs for data shared on CHOP Dataverse. It's a cloud server cost model. So contributors are charged 0.23 cents, so just slightly more than 2 cents per gigabyte per month, plus 9 cents per gigabyte each time it's downloaded. The suggested time frame that this should be publicly accessible. This would probably be preserved longer within ARCUS and CHOP, but this is how long it's accessible, like on a website in the CHOP Dataverse, is 10 years or 120 months, and that suggestion comes actually from some of the NIH policies. So I have a calculator Excel form where you can just kind of plug in the numbers and calculate an estimate, and we will share that with the slides. But I have like an example right here. So this is for 20 gigabytes. So for a data set, this would be pretty large. That example I just showed you with the R data set, that one is less than a gigabyte. So the estimated number of downloads per month, I suggest having that as a low number. This is, of course, a hard one to estimate or to know, because you're kind of guessing. But I suggest a low number because likely when you first publish this data or first publish a paper related to this data that might be linked to the CHOP Dataverse page, you might have a lot of downloads. But since you're sharing this for 10 years, that is going to go down over time. So I suggest a kind of lower number to kind of balance that out over time. And then you have number of months available, so 120 is suggested. So the estimated cost that you would put in an NIH application would be $1,080.46 to make it publicly available for 10 years. Preserving and sharing data through established repositories is an allowable cost for NIH grants. The cost should be listed in the appropriate cost category. Right now, that is Section F or other direct costs of your application. A written justification of no more than half a page for the cost is added as an attachment to the research and related budget form. There should only be one budget justification form submitted as part of the grant application. All justifications should be clearly identified and combined into a single document. Also, we can send with the slides, we've created a sample budget justification text for preserving your data within Arcus and sharing it on the CHOP Dataverse. So we'll share that, and anyone is welcome to use that text in their application or edit it as they need to. Here's information and email to contact the library science team if you want a data management and sharing plan consultation, if you want to learn more about the public access repository, or you're just interested generally in Arcus and some of the Arcus services. And then I also have links there to learn more about the data contribution process that you can explore. Because of course, to share publicly, you start with this process to preserve the data within CHOP first. All right. We're ready for some questions.
Thank you, Allison. Yes, Kelly.
Thank you so much for that. A question regarding the budget. Oh, sorry, you can't see me. The access is for 10 years. The budget is generally, the NIH grant is generally done after 5 years. So are we paying up front the full, say, $1,000 to CHOP under the assumption that you will pay that forward? And that will occur regardless of how many times there's a download. I'm just trying to figure out how this works after the grant is done.
Yeah. So that's the idea, because we know you have to write it into a grant and that you're likely you are sharing data beyond the grant period. And I'll often well beyond the grant period, because usually you're publishing around when it ends and you're supposed to share it for 10 years beyond that. So yes, the idea is that you will pay up front, and then Arcus will be responsible for maintaining that over the life of it.
Okay, so as the grant becomes active, are we not paying out to you until year 5 in general?
I think that, yeah. We can talk more in detail. Anae, I don't know.
Yeah, let's confirm that and then
Yeah,
get
on
back
exactly
to
when. But yeah, it would probably
exactly.
be, you would pay once. But yeah, I think we'd have to talk about exactly when that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Just thinking about budget periods and how best to work that in. Thanks.
Thank you.
Scott?
Yeah. Hello. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for both your presentations. And I guess I have two questions and somewhat interrelated. What is so usually my group, I'm at the CHOP Microbiome Center, and our group generally uploads all of our data from studies to NCBI SRA. And so what is I guess the question I'm always thinking is what's the advantage of going with Arcus and the Harvard Dataverse versus that? And does the Harvard Dataverse have capabilities to download, like, because using a command line versus a web interface? Because a lot of times I can't download gigantic data sets with a web interface.
Yeah, you can download if it's on the CHOP Dataverse through an API. So yeah, you could do that through a command line and get the data that way. So with the CHOP microbiome, though, I'm not sure where that lands in terms of like the NIH genomic data sharing policy.
Mhm.
I know it's a little bit different because you usually have organisms rather than human genomic data, right?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
remove all our human data from
Okay.
the bacteria. That's true. Usually.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I'd have to look closely on like where that falls in terms of the genomic data sharing policy because as I mentioned, the NIH kind of suggests more restrictive data sharing, like less public if it's like human genomic data,
Yeah.
which is why they want you to use their databases because they know that those will follow those restrictions. But I would think yeah, so I'd have to look into that specifically with microbiome data on how that, um, since they're organisms.
Well, I'm just wondering what are the general advantages of ARCIS versus the NCBI repositories?
Well, first, if it's within ARCIS, so this is before the public repository, it is deliverable to ARCIS Labs. And so it has some enhanced features in terms of sharing data within the CHOP enterprise, where CHOP researchers can request an ARCIS lab, which is a remote computing lab. So that
Yep.
has like the high performance computing environment, certain tools, and like some support from some like possibly like data science or bioinformaticians and like the education team. And so you kind of like open up that possibility of sharing within the enterprise. And also within an ARCIS lab, you can have it connected with clinical data potentially. All
Right.
depending on what you have permission to see. So there's that advantage. Then sharing publicly, I already gave the one advantage of the API, so you can do these larger downloads without having to do each file individually. And which I think is different from the way the SRA works, is it's kind of um, I have to remember which NIH repository the SRA is. But I think sometimes like your study information and then like the sequence information can be like a little bit separated, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
don't they have, yeah,
it's not well organized.
yeah,
It's like you have to drill down to an individual sample to actually see the metadata. There isn't like a single page where it could just
yeah,
have all the metadata displayed,
yeah.
easily accessible. It's
So that I would say that's the other main difference is
yeah,
that you have one page that has all the information about your study, and that has the um, reference information in terms of if you need to share any protocols or like kind of like README type things to kind of understand the data or describe like the process of creating it. And yeah, all the description and those files are like together on one page with one link that you can share to other people instead of it being kind of like separated.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good advantage. Thank you.
Yeah.
We do have a couple questions in the chat too. I see one from Barbara Chiachetti about how to calculate an estimate of how many times the data will be downloaded.
Yeah, that's a hard one to predict. I think as we share more files over time, we'll kind of just see trends on how often things are downloaded, and we can kind of give those numbers to you, say, you know, like a lot of these other studies that are a similar type have been downloaded, you know, on average X amount per month. I can reach out, I haven't done this yet, but I could reach out to Harvard Dataverse and see if they have some numbers on like average downloads for different types of data over time. And that would probably be the best way to estimate or anticipate what that is probably going to be. But that one is harder because you're kind of guessing, and really with all the data management and sharing plans, you're kind of like making a plan and kind of foreseeing what kind of data you have. But that always can change and progress over the course of your grant.
Thanks, Allison. And then we have another question in there from John Harrington. In my experience as a PI, creating a DMSP is perfunctory and not part of formal grant review. The real challenge for study teams is the bespoke task of identifying data that they have participant permission to share and curating and annotating grant data. NIH says one can budget for that time, but it's not really realistic in my experience for several reasons. What are the limits of what ARCIS can provide for these study-specific data tasks?
I mean, that's a great question. I think it's one that we'll have to sort of review and then get back to you on this, because we need to discuss on what our limits are and what is available for us to provide in terms of this. So we'll get back to you on this. Yeah.
Hi, this is Andy again. May I ask another question if there aren't others in the chat? Do you have experience with qualitative data, interviews, and their upload, and have a framework for us to do that as well?
Yeah, I think we've had some data similar. I'm guessing if you've done interviews, you probably have like, did you create like a kind of red cap form where you have the questions and have kind of filled in information or responses?
We have transcripts, and then those transcripts have been coded
Okay.
based upon our team's interpretation using qualitative methods.
Yeah, so I don't think we've specifically done that in terms of like sharing data on Harvard Dataverse. But we have supported like other similar things in terms of within ARCIS. So we'd have to kind of see what makes sense for your group. It would probably be figuring out like a naming structure for the different like interviews and creating a lot of like reference information. I shared a little bit for that R model where you're kind of having like maybe a data dictionary that's describing like the questions and like the standards for that and like some like README files to kind of like combine that together. But I think we'd have to like talk with you individually to kind of see what makes sense for your group. But we have data organization like framework that we use for every study that comes in. So we usually start there and kind of see how it needs to be customized for different data types.
Great, thank you.
Do we have any more questions or comments? As I said, the slides will be available after the session and also the recording as well. And for the questions that came up in our chat, we'll get back to you on those as well. Okay. So if we don't have any more questions or comments, we can have a little bit of the time back, which is 3 minutes. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We're going to have a similar session next Wednesday on the 29th from 1 to 2 p.m. So if you would like to join us again or have anyone else on your study team that would like to join us, we'll be happy to have you. So thank you everyone for your time and for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.